Okay.
You have it?
Yep.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. You got us?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So I'm Sean Watrous, and David Mortimer's here with me. We're doing EMS provider health and wellness. So the objective of this course is to address providers experiencing exhaustion, fatigue, physical and mental stress that they deal with every day on the job. So this course will discuss diet, fitness, sleep deprivation, and mental health issues for EMS providers, along with some corrective actions to help them live a healthier lifestyle and hopefully be happier doing their job in EMS. Okay, so EMS diet. So fast food happens to be one of the big struggles for EMS providers. EMS providers usually have to eat in a go, or they only have a few minutes to eat before taking that long distance transport to Philadelphia at 2 a.m. Therefore, fast food becomes a very appealing and easy meal for us to turn to. So one of the corrective actions to fix this is to pre-pack a lunch, maybe something you could eat on the go on the way back from that Philadelphia transport or Pittsburgh run in the middle of the night. Packing lunch can also save you money in the long term because we all know we don't make the big bucks being EMTs and paramedics. Okay. Another big issue, sleep deprivation. So in a Journal of Emergency Medical Services, an article called Pro Bono, they address that the U.S. Department of Transportation identifies fatigue as the #1 safety problem in transportation operations, costing more than $12 billion a year. Sleepy drivers can be as dangerous as alcohol-impaired drivers, and the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates that in 2015, more than 72,000 police reports were crashes that involved drowsy drivers. These crashes led to 41,000 injuries and more than 800 deaths. So what is sleep deprivation? According to the American Academy of Sleep and Medicine, sleep deprivation occurs when someone fails to get enough sleep, obviously. The amount of sleep needed may vary from person to person. However, adults seem to need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. We know in EMS that a lot of us work 24 or even 36-hour shifts some places still, and that just isn't happening. So here we have people who work 24 hours of sustained wakefulness, perform tasks that involve tracking levels comparable to those of an alcohol level of 0.10. That's from the New England Journal of Medicine. They also pointed out that in all 50 states, it's illegal to drive at a blood alcohol level of that or higher. So, after 24 hours, you're pretty much like an intoxicated driver. So how can we prevent sleep deprivation? Shifts no longer than 16 hours long and coming to work well rested are some top choices. A lot of people, are coming from job to job. You show up at your job and say, oh, I'm tired because I just worked a 12-hour shift somewhere else. I think that's the person's own responsibility to try to schedule some downtime in between shifts and make sure you're getting rest. If you are picking up, the 24, 36-hour shift, they recommend a 30-minute nap time during periods of sleep deprivation. The study recommended that anything over 30 minutes puts you into that REM cycle, and you're in a deeper sleep that's harder to wake up from. When you do wake up from that sleep, you would be more drowsy. So they recommended a minimum, or a maximum rather, of 30-minute naps. And David Mortimer is going to talk about some physical fitness habits in EMS.
All right, so physical fitness in EMS. EMS providers are required to be physically fit so they can lift, pull, and carry patients out of the ambulance or out of a dangerous area. I know we have all probably been there or yet to be there in that pulling somebody out of a bathroom or something. In Jason Bush's article, Are You Fit for Duty?, he explains that EMS providers are more likely to miss shifts due to injuries than the average employed American. He also explains that fitness in EMS needs to be addressed and focused on to combat injuries. Some staying fit, some easy ways: stop smoking, adequate hydration, and stretching. Being physically fit doesn't take going to the gym every day and working out, trying to get those big muscles and looking pretty for the girls. Some simple basic stretches can really make a difference between hurting your back and not. With lifting patients, a big thing I think needs to be also addressed is lifting with your legs, not your back, so you're less likely to injure your back. I know that's sometimes a struggle, but I think that's more conscious in people, then we're going to start helping at least reduce injuries. And with stretches, trying to work out those muscles that we usually don't. Quitting smoking can be a huge benefit in providers. In Graham's medical article, smoking effects on lost work time for EMS personnel. It calls attention to the fact that 17% of EMS providers smoke. One might wonder why smoking is something that's made its way into EMS workforce. Even with what we see on a daily basis, seeing what smoking does to people, I mean, it hits big on the fact that like a lot of smoking goes straight to people for stress. I mean, after a stressful call, a lot of people might smoke a cigarette. That becomes a habit after a while. I think that's something that needs to address within the company, maybe a de-stressing program like CISMs after calls to help reduce smoking on the job. And EMS provider burnout, big thing I think we all either worked or know the company burnout. Providers can become burnt out, and as a result of being burnt out, demonstrate poor patient care. Providers see bad calls and stomach-turning injuries. Providers become burnt out due to long and tiring shifts. Sometimes, EMS providers have 3 to 4 jobs and come from one job to another. Being on little sleep and dealing with the same call, maybe the same patient day after day, gets tiring and annoying. Some might start burning out after that. Continue working, start demonstrating poor patient care to even those who have called 911 3, 4, 5 times a week, actually have a medical emergency, and they blow it under the rug, and then God forbid something happens. To help combat some of this, better sleep, better shift rotations with the providers, switching it up instead of always being thrown on night shift and saying that they can't switch, maybe being thrown on day shift. And I know it's a struggle, but some companies maybe offer a little bit more pay, shift differentials like they do at hospitals, $1 or $2 extra more for night shifts to help deal with that. That's more of a company issue that if you see in that, try to talk with the company and figure out something. Not all companies can afford that, but that's something to seriously sit down with chiefs and help make a better decision and figure out where to go from that. And that is it. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Rick, do you have us still?
I do.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions for Mort or Sean? Okay, Brandon has. You spoke a little bit about back injuries and lifting. Have you come across anything of relevance regarding the auto lifting litters and a reduction of injury? And how would the money saved on provider injury overcome the workers' comp of injured providers?
Well, so to start off with that, back injuries, relevance, there's not a lot. With a lot that we talked about, there isn't much studies done like there is for like ketamine. This seems to be a big issue that kind of gets swept under a rug for a lot of people. I don't see many studies coming out for X, Y, and Z. Autolifting stretchers would definitely help with that, but that isn't also the root cause. It would help getting people in and out of the trucks, definitely help put a little less stress. But in regards to even getting somebody off the floor, pulling somebody out of the bathroom, that still needs to be something in there. So auto definitely will help a little bit, but isn't going to solve the problem completely.
No, that's enough, Mark.
Yes. Hopefully that answers.
Hopefully that answers your question. I think more trying to say is there's not a whole lot of studies on that. Yeah, personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. I will tell you there was some research done when you look at articles like that, and what you would end up seeing, Brandon, is there would almost have to be a seven. You would not see a unless you had a special deal with your workman's comp um, provider. It would take almost 7 to 10 years to see a net zero, to where everything would come back to zero in that time frame. Same thing goes for if you look at anything related to wellness programs for employees. That is almost 10 years to actually see a savings, if anything, when it comes to that. So when most ambulance services look at those, it's this huge outlay, whereas again you're playing the odds when it comes to the workman's comp. But that's a great question when it comes to that. So thank you for asking. Does anybody else have any questions for Mort or Sean? So Mort, I have a question. And
Yes.
again, oh wait, Sam Bear School has asked, have you guys come across a perfect model of EMS, whether a city or municipality that's, quote, doing it right?
I don't think that there's even a correct answer on that. I think if you look at a big general consensus, there's companies that are doing one thing, other companies doing another. I think it's company based. I don't think any one company is doing it and everybody should be following that role model. I think that's dependent on company to company. Every company's different, how they operate, what they see. So I think that's a company.
Okay. I do have one question. Hope that answered your question, Sam. I do have a question. When you said something about, and again, this is going to be you did the research. It's going to be a personal opinion. But when you said about adequate hydration, we in healthcare tend to live and die by the caffeine standards, whether or not that be Red Bull, Monster, Death Wish coffee. What would you recommend individuals do with hydration? Because we have classmates that show up with gallon bottles and are very regimented in that. Do you have any comments or statements on hydration and anything that's good or bad?
Yeah, they recommended about 3 liters a day for men and 2.5 for women. But most hospitals have water available to EMS. At least most hospitals I've been to have either bottled water or water fountains. So even if it's a busy day, stopping in between a call and making sure you have a bottle in between calls, I think would keep you hydrated for the day. I myself have to make it a conscious effort because I'm not a big fan of water. I'd rather drink soda. So I have to kind of force myself after every call. I'm going to chug a bottle of water to stay hydrated.
Okay. All right. That's acceptable. Again, looking at your audience there, how many of you guys and girls out there would choose to rather drink a sugary soda or even a Gatorade? When you look at the the sugar concentration of a regular Gatorade versus a, say, G2 or a G0 or something like that, versus coffee or something like that. So it's true. And again, how many of us lived, I mean, when we look around, the general EMS population, if you look at everyone, we're not the Bastains of health and fitness that you would expect us to be. I mean, living off of 99-cent bags of, you know, of McWhoppers or whatever your food for the day is. That's something to consider as well. You know, especially, Rager, you're on board here. Why don't you explain to everyone? Josh Rager works for Prince George. Why don't you explain to some individuals that may not be familiar with large city shifts and explain your work schedule for them?
So basically my work schedule is a 24/72. I work for Prince George's County, and I'm at the third busiest station in the county. We run about 10,000 calls a year between 3 units. Our work schedule, pretty much we're out, most days we're out for all 24 hours. If not, we get a few hours here or there, but most of that time is spent taking naps or whatnot. Otherwise, it's just getting your sleep and getting your food on the go. It's pretty much the same as here.
Do you guys cook in or anything like that?
We cook dinner together every night. Pretty much lunch and breakfast is on your own. We do have a gym in the station that we can use as we're able to.
Okay. All right, everybody. Hey, guy, Mort, Sean, thank you for your time. So as our next presenter here gets ready, let me switch Mort and those guys. Mort and organizer. Sean, you should be there. Let me find you my list here. Ryan. All right, Josh, you should be up. Share your screen.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, so my project was on rubella. If you look at the top, it says that it was presented by Nate Kramer and Andrew Willman. They were both in last year's class, and I was originally in that class too. So they did about 3/4 of the work, and I just helped get it there. So rubella is recitative endovascular balloon occlusion of the aorta, otherwise known as rubella. Rubella is used most of the time for compressible torso injuries, and it's the leading cause of preventable death following traumatic injury. With non-compressible torso injuries, most patients will die if unable to apply direct pressure to an area of injury. Rubella has helped phased out cross-clamping of the aorta, which has been proven to be less effective and more time-consuming in trauma situations. There's a 5-step procedures and 3 different zones that the rubella can be placed depending on what type of trauma and how they got it. Rubella, even though it sounds pretty new, it has been around for a long time. The first attempt in recorded rubella was during the Korean War. Both patients that they tried it on did end up succumbing to their injuries. Rubella then was sort of shunned to the side for many years, and it was brought back during like the 1980s. The convenience sample performed in the 1980s to prove the effectiveness of rubella. This study made the advancement in procedures, but during the study it only had a reported an overall survival rate of 26%. It began to catch a lot more during the warfare that started in 2003 in the Middle East. Out of that time, an analysis of 4,596 combat fatalities died from uncontrolled bleeding. Uncontrolled bleeding counted for more than 90% of potentially survivable casualties. And these would be the patients that would benefit from rubella or cross-clamping the aorta. In 2014, there was a pre-hospital study performed in Paris, France, where approximately 2,000 patients met the criteria for Reboa, and that was identified by pre-hospital clinicians. In 2016, a systemic review of Reboa was used for many indications, and it was becoming more popular and safer than cross-clamping. Indications for Reboa is blunt and penetrating trauma, and Reboa is used in many emergency departments across the U.S., but it's not as used as much as cross-clamping. Reboa has also shown to be successful in ruptured aortic aneurysm and postpartum bleeding from placenta previa and placenta eruption. Many believe that positive results for Reboa are believed because it's less invasive and require less time than aortic cross-clamping. For aortic cross-clamping, it usually takes about 90 minutes before they're able to open them up for a thoracotomy and everything. Reboa, the time frame is 20 minutes to have access to femoral artery. And they insert a balloon via a catheter rather than opening the chest cavity up. Contraindications of Reboa. Injuries to the aorta or the aortic arch is an absolute contraindication. Hemorrhage proximal to the zones of inclusion, and we'll go over them here in a few minutes, including the neck, axilla, and supremedium sternum, and then relative contraindications, including age, comorbidities, and terminal illnesses. So they recommend that contraindications related to age is anybody over the age of 70 and anybody under the age of 18 does not get any Reboa. Another contraindication is PEA lasting longer than 10 minutes, pulseless electrical activity. So Reboa versus cross-clamping. This is the big topic of discussion because cross-clamping has been around for years. They achieve the same goal, but procedures have major differences. Time's the big one that we talked about already. The aortic cross-clamping requires a thoracotomy, causing the approximate time from the door to surgery being up to 90 minutes, where Reboa can reduce this time to 20 minutes. It's less invasive and less infections. So for the thoracotomy, they have to open you up, and then they open the chest cavity. Then they provide a surgical clamp to occlude the aorta. Whereas the Reboa is a catheter into the common femoral artery, and it uses a balloon to occlude the aorta in a destinated location. Big thing is it's less infection and it's less healing time. Cross-clamping is still preferred by many physicians because it's a proven technique. Reboa, even though it's been around since the 1950s, still is coming into the modern day, and there's not many research done on it. There's three types of Reboa. You have the coated balloon system. It uses a guide wire to guide the catheter in place and is the most used system in the ERs across the country. The coated balloon system is made by Cook Medical. That was one of the earlier Reboa devices. The ER Reboa system uses a catheter ridge enough to be used as a guide wire to move the balloon in place. The novel aortic occlusion device is that the difference between that and the ER Reboa is that it is a non-latex balloon and it's compressed with CO2 to inflate the balloon instead of air in the syringe. The latex balloon also inflates as it travels up the vessel. So rather than them putting the balloon into place and then inflating it, as it goes up the femoral artery, up towards the aorta, it starts to inflate. All three of these use a double lumen catheter. One lumen is used for inflation and deflation, and the other one is used for pressure monitoring. The main difference in all three types is the way they are placed. For the coda balloon system, you also have a much larger sheath that requires, after they're done, you have to go back in for a procedure to remove the sheath and have your artery put back together. 5 steps to success for Reboa use. First step is artery access. They make the access to the artery by cannulating the femoral artery, usually by a femoral cut down. The second step is placing the guide wire and introducing the sheath. Is the introducer sheath is slid over the guide wire in the artery. The third step is choosing one of the 3 zones most appropriate for the patient, depending on where their bleeding is. And that's usually done by external landmarks, chest x-ray, and fluoroscopy. The fourth step is placing the Reboa catheter. In placing the Reboa catheter is placed through the introducer to predetermined desired depth. This step must be confirmed. It must be confirmed through the fluoroscopy or chest x-ray to make sure it's in the right place. The fifth step is inflating the balloon, which is dependent on which system you use and how you inflate it. This should perform the proper occlusion of the aorta. So at that time, that's when your time starts ticking for the aorta, for the blockage of blood flow for the patient. At this time, you can fix hemorrhaging, and during all these steps, resuscitation should be ongoing with proper administration of blood products. When it comes to time for deflation, it needs to be slow and controlled. There's 3 zone locations, and there's a reasoning behind each location. So zone 1 extends from the left subclavian artery to the celiac artery. Zone 1 is considered for a focus exam and treatment in intra-abdominal hemorrhage. Zone 2 extends from the celiac trunk to the lowest renal artery. Zone 2 is not commonly used for Reboa unless difficulty controlling the bleeding in use with the other zones. Zone 3 extends from the lowest renal artery to the aortic bifurcation. Zone 3 is used for treatment of suspected pelvic hemorrhage. Pre-hospital use, while we probably won't see this in the United States for a long time, and there's no active studies going on. And this is obviously not in our scope. There was a major study performed in France in 2014 where they found approximately 1,200 patients had suspected injuries that met criteria for Reboa, and about 3.2% would have benefited from Reboa in the field. In London, they're transporting physicians to the field and performing Reboa on scenes at call prior to transportation of the patient. In conclusion, Reboa is not a new treatment, but it's becoming the new standard for treatment of internal traumatic hemorrhage. Throughout the next few years, and maybe even decades, Reboa will probably become the gold standard. Emergency room and critical care physicians are actively working on new techniques, equipment, standard practice, and training to make Reboa the gold standard rather than cross-clamping. In the years to come, Reboa will be available in every level 1 trauma center and most level 2 trauma centers. Reboa may even be available in the pre-hospital setting in areas that trauma centers are few and far between. I have a quick video just explaining Reboa real quick. There's not much sound to it. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Josh, could you see the chats?
Yes.
Sam has a question there.
So a lot of this is for your abdominal hemorrhage and pelvic hemorrhaging. While it does occur quickly, those patients seem to hang on for a little bit longer to get to the hospital and stuff like that. I don't think there is a high mortality rate, and even doing it would at least buy some more time to try and save that person's life, if that makes any sense and answers your question.
The use of cross clamping in those trauma patients would be those patients, again, that, as you had said, is one of the relative contraindications is PEA. But again, most of the time you end up seeing a left-sided thoracotomy very quickly, to where they can just reach in and cross clamp at the level of about the fourth intercostal space on that left side, because they avoid doing it on the right side because of the different anatomy on the right side. But again, these are those cases where you do have patients with that blunt or suspecting trauma in that manner. So what we end up, what you end up seeing is, this is, in that time frame when ultimately they need a thoracotomy. But again, if they can't get to the OR, or if this is a multi-trauma, the second or third trauma coming into a level 1 or level 2, where they may not have their A team available, this may be something. Or if it's a transport, something occurs, because honestly, with the Reboa research that I've read, the majority of the physicians that could do this are individuals that have cardiothoracic catheterization training. A general surgeon might be able to do this, let's say at a level 3 trauma center in Pennsylvania. Let's say they go to UPMC Lidditz, and they end up having to be transported. An ER doc or a critical care physician can't come down and insert this under fluoroscopy, if they have it, and be able to stop that hemorrhage, and hopefully wait for the helicopter to come or something like that. So that's where this is being built into with you.
The big thing also is the time. Getting the balloon in there sooner rather than later stops that hemorrhaging in the abdominal cavity in the pelvic area, so you're not leaking all that blood out. You're able to replenish some of that blood, and you're also able to bring it back in. Replenish some of that blood, you're able to stop the hemorrhage, and buys you time to get that fixed. Brandon, I don't think it's in any flight medicine. The only place that's really using it right now is over in Europe, France and London. They're using pre-hospital physicians to go out and do the procedure.
And you'll find out too, Brandon, that a lot of the stuff in the UK, that's where a lot of the ECMO stuff came from that we're seeing now coming into the ERs. That was done pre-hospitally. But again, that system out in the UK is a little bit different than what we have here in the United States. But, and again, as you had said, Josh, you may see this at one time or the other. Seeing a cross clamp occurs in the ER. The docs don't know what's going on. They're bleeding. Let's get them up to the OR. And a lot of ERs don't, even level 1 trauma centers don't like doing it anymore. Don't like doing clamshells or doing left-sided thoracostomies. Because again, you open them up. Now they're open to more infection, and it's a higher rate of higher mortality with all that. So, but it's one of those tools in the toolbox, and hopefully you guys get out there when you start working, you start talking to Dr. Lee and those guys, and ask them about their position on it, whether they use it. So, all right, good discussion. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. So, last student presentation for this class. Maria, Tori, are you guys online?
Yes.
Okay. Who's presenting the presentation off your computer? Who's doing that? Maria just left. Tori, is that you or Maria?
From my understanding, Maria's going to do it.
All right. I got to wait for her to log back in then. All right. Maria has arrived.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be presenting it. So you could
Okay.
just.
All right. You are the presenter, so you should be able to log in.
Okay. And how can I not share my webcam? Oh, there you go. Guess that. Oh shit.
We heard that, Maria.
Sorry. Trying to figure this out. How do you do this?
You would go down to the bottom of the screen. You are the presenter, so you should have 4 buttons down at the bottom. One says mic, camera, screen, and leave. You want to share. You want to hit the little button that says screen, where you want to share your screen.
Okay, because I'm on my phone.
I don't know how that's going to work when you're trying to do the presentation. So that interaction is going to have to be. Does anybody know how you would do that on your phone?
I'm trying to share my screen. Let's see. Oh crap. Let's see. Yeah. Are you able to download it from Blackboard?
Yeah. Is it
Because
up?
I uploaded it.
Okay. You have to give me a minute then. Give me a minute, everyone. I have to get over there. Maria. Okay, fix your volume, please. All right. You guys should see Tori and Maria's presentation.
All right. Can we start then?
Yeah.
Okay. So our presentation is about RSI, so rapid sequential intubation in the pre-hospital setting. So you can go ahead to the second slide. So the history of RSI. So in the 1950s, the Association of Anesthetists of Great Britain investigated deaths associated with anesthesia, and they found that 43 deaths were caused by regurgitation and aspiration. So there was a British anesthesiologist called Dr. Selleck in the 1950s. He came up with the Selleck maneuver, which is the picture that's shown to your left or right. So basically, the Selleck maneuver is the application of firm pressure on the cricoid cartilage to avoid passive regurgitation of gastric contents to the airway. So in that picture, basically, there's a person just holding pressure to the cricoid cartilage. So before the Selleck maneuver, anesthesia was induced in an upright position to prevent the airway from getting gastric content. Then eventually RSI began in the EMS world in the 1970s. Ever since then, there has been many controversies from individuals if RSI should be allowed in the pre-hospital setting or not. So the third slide now. So what is RSI? So basically, RSI is an airway management technique that induces immediate responsiveness with an induction agent, or known as a sedation agent and a paralytic agent. There are 7 steps you have to follow. These 7 steps are preparation, pre-oxygenation, pre-treatment, paralysis with induction, protection, and positioning. So basically, preparation is just getting all your equipment together. The pre-oxygenation phase is trying to replace the nitrogen reservoir in the lungs with oxygen. So you basically hyperventilate the patient at first to get all that nitrogen out of the reservoir and replace it with oxygen. The pre-treatment phase is basically either lidocaine or any opioid analgesics given to the patient to minimize the negative physiologic response to intubation. And then it's paralysis. So basically is with induction such as ketamine, which is the sedative agent. Other people use like etomidate or like fentanyl. And then you have protection and position of the head, which basically is maintaining basically to get the best view of the glottic opening. And then protection is basically using the Selleck maneuver, which is applying the firm pressure on the cricoid cartilage, like I mentioned before, to avoid the regurgitation or gastric contents to go into the airway. And then finally, it's the placement, which is the placement of the ET tube in the trachea. And basically, the goal of all of this is to intubate the trachea as quickly and as safely to reduce the chances of the patient becoming further hypoxic. So the indications are basically unable to maintain their own airway. Some of the contraindications of RSI is suspected hyperkalemia or degenerative neuromuscular diseases. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So Victoria will be talking about the induction agent.
Alrighty, so the induction agents mainly used are ketamine, etomidate, and fentanyl. Next slide. All right, so ketamine is relatively new to our pre-hospital setting. We usually use it in excited delirium cases, but it can also be used as a sedative for intubation. It's a dissociative agent. It blocks sensory to perception, disrupts the neurotransmitter glutamate. Also, one of the things with induction agents, like the main goal of intubation basically is, keep them alive. There's no psychological effects, no pain, no memory and awareness. And the goal of the induction agent is to kind of reduce pain, so that way they're breathing easier when you go to paralyze them. Next slide. Okay, the most commonly seen one is etomidate. Etomidate acts at the level of reticulation activation system to produce an anesthesia-like effect. In some cases, it can decrease the intracranial pressure and cerebral metabolic rate. I actually highlighted some of the big things with etomidate. It's some of the contradictions. Don't use it if they are hyperkalemic. It can decreases the kidney outputs and everything. I also didn't mention we have the doses and everything up there in the onset times. With the giving the induction agents, like make sure you let it go, like you wait a little bit for it to take effect before you give the paralytic, because if you paralyze them too quickly, they can feel that, and intubation is a pretty traumatic thing for patients, and we're trying to keep them, you know, relatively as calm and painless as possible. Next slide, please. So the most common thing we see is, especially in pre-hospital, is our fentanyl. Fentanyl is obviously an opioid analgesic. Fentanyl helps with pain. Like I said, intubation is a pretty painful procedure. This is, like I said, it's the most commonly used one. It helps decrease the catecholamine discharge secondary to intubation. Some of the contradictions to fentanyl is hypotension, which is really bad with intubation. If they're hypotensive before intubation, they have a very high mortality rate. So keeping their pressures up is extremely critical. Once the induction agent is given, then you can go into the paralytics. Next slide, please. Some of the basic paralytics we see are succinylcholine and rocuronium. Next slide. So succinylcholine is a paralytic. Sorry, people. Yep, there it is. This is also bad for hyperkalemic patients. Basically, it's very rapid onsetting. It works the best for paralytics. I just can't read my handwriting. And okay, yeah, next slide. Sorry, I'm trying to read my handwriting and it's absolutely awful. Rocuronium is another big paralytic we see this one a lot, and when you're intubating children, for some reason it just works better in kids. Again, it's also a paralytic. It has a very fast onset. It can last up to 30 minutes, if not longer. Go away. Okay, next slide. All right, Maria.
All right, so now we'll be comparing basically two different protocols. So Delaware's versus PA protocol. So basically Delaware, they're able to RSI patients. So a lot of the paramedics in Delaware were concerned with patients that did not have a patent airway and were combative during basically a head or neck injury, and their airway was compromised. So basically they were looking at the time it would take for them to transport the patient to a hospital. So their nearest trauma center is the Christiana Hospital, and basically they concluded that from their nearest residence it would take 20 minutes, and that's not including traffic. But if there were traffic, their max time will probably be between 30 to 40 minutes. So they basically concluded that it's safer to just RSI them on scene, and it would take at least 14 minutes rather than transporting them and having their airway compromised, and their likelihood of surviving would be unlikely. So they chose to approve the RSA protocol. Basically, their protocol consists of 2 paramedics to be able to RSI. The one paramedic would basically be given the sedative agent, and the other one would be yeah, so the one paramedic would be given the medication such as the sedative agent and the paralytic agent, while the other medic is above the patient's head and ready to intubate once the medications are provided. So basically, compared to PA's protocol, we can't RSI, but we're allowed to basically give a sedative agent such as etomidate, but it's the same basically protocol where you need two paramedics, but you just can't give a paralytic agent in Pennsylvania. So, and the reason why we can't RSI patients in Pennsylvania is because there was a study done by Dr. Henry Wang in 2004, and he basically looked at patients who had head injuries and that were intubated by paramedics in Pennsylvania. And basically the data that he collected concluded that the patients who were intubated by the paramedics had a higher mortality rate and worse neurologic outcomes by the time they got to the ED than those patients that got RSI'd at a hospital or that were intubated in the emergency department. So, and this was most likely due to, he also figured out that Pennsylvania over a 1 year period, only 67% of paramedics performed 2 or fewer intubations and 39% basically performed none. So just the not having that much experience in intubating patients really affected the outcome of the patient itself, because the way that these like sedative agents and paralytic agents work is that they work pretty fast. Like as you can see, like the onset time of the paralytic agents is pretty fast, so you only have so much time to be able to tube them. So it was also seen that basically we don't have much experience in intubating patients. Like we don't have much we don't have like we're not allowed to be in the operating room for other reasons, like maybe there's like nursing students that have to be in the operating room or whatever. So paramedic students don't have enough time to, or don't get that experience to be up there and be able to practice their intubation skills. So that's another conflict that a lot of paramedics in Pennsylvania have. So in conclusion, so the next slide. So basically, so RSI is no different than regular intubation that is performed in the field in Pennsylvania. The only difference is that we don't use paralytic agents. And then basically, when in doubt, when intubation, always have the patient's best interest in mind. So, and then basically, what if this was your family? What would you rather have? Like, would you rather have Pennsylvania be able to allow paramedics to RSI patients or not? Which this is the issue with a lot of individuals trying to figure out if we should be allowed or not. So that's it. And then the next page is just my references. And that's it.
So this is Dr. Rehart. I think that was a very nice presentation. I just had one question. Actually, I have like 3 questions. But are you recommending that we do rapid sequence intubation with paralytics in Pennsylvania, or is this kind of a review that it doesn't really work?
It depends on the patient. Honestly, like if the outcome of the patient is better to RSI them, they will have a better outcome, then I feel like we should. I was actually on the call like 2 weeks ago. It was an MVA, and there was a patient who had 2nd-degree burns to like 25 to 30% of his body. And we requested a helicopter. And we weren't able to RSI him because we're just not allowed to. And we didn't have a second paramedic, so we weren't able to sedate them or like intubate them due to not having another paramedic to be able to like give etomidate. So I feel like in that case, I feel like he benefited from RSI because once the flight crew ended up coming, they RSI'd him anyways. So I feel like in his case, if we did have a second paramedic, in his case, I feel like RSI should be allowed.
So, at 25% burns, they RSI'd. Was he having respiratory compromise or?
So he had, he had like burns to his airway and stuff. He's basically in respiratory distress. So yeah.
So here, let me ask you another question. What is the if you're going to go for lethal injection, like you're on the death row, what do you get as far as medicines?
Um, not sure.
So sadly, you get two of the three things that we give for intubation, and the only thing you don't get is potassium chloride to stop the heart. So you'll get midazolam, or you'll get some sort of pentobarbital, and then a paralytic. And so a paralytic and a sedating medicine is 2/3 the way to a execution. So that's why it's really gutsy to do this. So I really loved your presentation. I think it's great. I think it's great to talk about it, but it's super creepy when you give these medicines and all of a sudden you can't get the airway. And then you look at the statistics that you get 2 airway chances, in a year, or 1 out of 2 years. So anyhow, that's just kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Rehart. Hey, Dr. Rehart, we do have a question here. Sam Grimm has a question. I think you'd be a little bit better to answer this. Why does using these medications in RSI cause hyper K?
So the way the medicines, well, that's based on succinylcholine. So the way it's metabolized can cause hyperkalemia. That's why we go to a different paralytic like vecuronium, and it's just a mechanism of action. And believe me, I'm never going to argue about hyperkalemia based on paralytics. It's more just how much access do you have to frequent intubation. And every day, I've been doing this for 25 years. I get humbled every day I go in to intubate somebody. And you guys are held to a protocol standard. I can go in and I can look, I can put a laryngoscope in, look and see where I'm at. For you guys, that's considered a first, attempt intubation. For me, it's not. But I'm just kind of, looking to see where my trouble's at. And so anyhow, it's a completely different world between EMS and the emergency room. But I appreciate this presentation. I think it was very, very well done, and I thank you for your time.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Rehart. All right, everybody. I would like to thank my current students for their attention to detail and getting everything done in their timely fashion. This now concludes the presentation. So thank you. Please make sure, students, please make sure that you have graded your classmates and upload your rubrics graded with names, your name and the individuals and everything added to it. Upload them into the assignments portion of Blackboard. I have 2 areas, one for Monday's class and one for tonight's class. But if you scan them all in or do them all into one, that's completely fine. Upload them. That way I can get everybody all squared away with that. All right, that concludes tonight's presentation for the paramedic students. If you all would like to stay and listen to Matt discussion regarding mental health and EMS, we're going to, as soon as I give him permission to run everything, we're going to get him over there. All right. So my students, talk to you later if you don't want to stay. You guys were all here on Monday night, so you guys can leave. Give me 1 second, Matt. I'm just making a notation here.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay.
All right, there you go, Matt. Let me bring you up as to be our presenter. All right, you should, other than the feedback going on.
I think we've got it here. Okay.
All right, everybody. I'd like to introduce Matt. I always say your name non-Italian. I'd like to introduce Matt Giacopelli. Did I get it? Yes, no?
Close enough. Giacopelli, but that's okay.
Giacopelli. Matt will tell you his accolades, but as I told the group the other night, this has become this is the second year that we have asked Matt to come down and give his personal inflections on EMS culture and the taboo of suicide, and talk about mental health. So without further ado, I'll let Matt do what he does best. And if you wish for Con Ed for this program this evening, please make sure that you update the chat room with your certification number, please. All right, Matt, thank you.
Matt,
All right.
before you start, this is Dr. Rehart. As Regional Medical Director and Medical Director of the program, I just got to thank you for your bravery and this presentation. This is something that's been quiet for way too long. We see too many guys die. And so the fact that you are going to bare your soul and talk about your issues and the issues of EMS. This is a tough job. We get more negatives than positives. I just thank you, and I pray for you, and I pray for all of our EMS guys and girls. So anyhow, thank you for your bravery, and I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Yeah, anybody who was here on Monday, this will be the same thing as the other night. The jokes are probably going to be the same, so if you heard them all before, you'll hear them again. So I started in EMS in 1991 as a cadet at SUNY Maritime College in the Bronx in New York City. Graduated from Maritime in '96 with a degree in meteorology, and here I am as a paramedic. That's the first bus I ever ran in, and yes, I still do call it a bus. We can debate the semantics afterwards, but it's still kind of a fun term for me. Became a paramedic in 2000 and moved here to Pennsylvania in 2010. And currently I'm captain for Southern York County EMS. So what we're going to talk about tonight, what can drive a person to contemplate and possibly attempt suicide and ultimately complete suicide, how widespread the problem is, especially in emergency services and EMS specifically. Why do people keep their feelings inside, not open up about it? What's the problem there? Where does it all come from? And more importantly, what's being done about it on local, national, and even international levels? And most importantly, what can we as individuals do about it? And as you've probably guessed already, to do this, I'm going to tell you a little story about myself and a time that I kind of hit rock bottom. And I tell this story to you in hopes that if you're having troubles yourself, that you can write another chapter in your story, or if you know somebody who is having some issues, maybe you can help them write another chapter in their story. Because as the doctor once said, we're all stories in the end. Just make it a good one, okay? So I have a few disclaimers about myself here to, well, break the ice, break the tension here. I do have a very warped sense of humor. I attribute most of that to my father, but of course, this becomes a coping mechanism that we all develop to deal with the things that we see in EMS. Certainly, I do take this subject very seriously, but if we can lighten the mood a little bit, certainly we'll go a long way towards helping ourselves here. Two, I'm Italian and I'm from New York City. This works a lot better when I do this in person, but you know, I do tend to talk with my hands a lot, and I do tend to talk a little fast. So if you want me to shut up, you can just tie my hands down. A little caveat to that is the shortest distance between 2 points is never one of my stories. And D, I do tend to break out in movie lines and song lyrics whenever possible. I'm not going to sing for you, of course. But again, to break the tension a little bit and to put this in a little bit of perspective, a quick story, which I promise will be quick. A few years ago, my partner and I were assessing a chest pain patient, and my partner asked the patient, have you ever had an MI? Do you have CHF? Do you have COPD? And I really just couldn't help myself. I had to break out with, well, if the VP is such a VIP, shouldn't the PC be kept on the QT? Because if it leaks out to the VC, he could be given MIA and we'd all be put on KP. My partner's not was not as much of a movie fan as I am, so I'd heard the expression staring daggers before. Never actually seen it, but certainly this was the case at this point. But luckily the patient popped off with, I love that movie, good morning Vietnam. So luckily the patient actually saved me that day. At any rate, we'll get on with this. I am originally from New York City, Queens in particular. And as you might imagine, in New York City, there's always something in the air in more ways than one. But with all the helicopters and planes and blimps constantly flying overhead, I quickly developed a real passion for aviation. I wanted to become a pilot, strive to learn everything I could about ships, well, mainly planes. Ships kind of came later, but certainly planes and helicopters and all things that flew. Growing up, it's also kind of where I got the emergency services bug. My great uncle was the chauffeur of Engine Company 288 in Maspeth, Queens, where I grew up. Growing up, anytime I was walking by the firehouse and he'd be around, he'd pick me up, put me in the engine, drive around, show me the equipment. So it's kind of a neat thing. He retired in 1992, and the company became a squad company in 1998, which is the Special Operations Division of the FDNY. And I put this picture in here specifically for, well, I guess two reasons. If you look up in front of the squad here, you'll see the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. This picture is looking out from the bays of the firehouse down towards Manhattan. This firehouse actually suffered the largest loss of life of any individual firehouse in New York City on September 11th, 2001. 19 firefighters left between the squad and the Hazardous Materials Company, and no one came back. It's just one of those things that's always in the back of our mind, and kind of one of those things that, when is it going to happen again? Not really if it's going to happen again, but it certainly weighs heavily, and the memory of all those who perished certainly weighs on our minds. In 1983, yes, I'm dating myself, but in 1983, my parents moved us out further on to Long Island, or as you folks in here in Pennsylvania would like to call it, Long Island. And if you don't know, Long Island is also known as the cradle of aviation. It's where Lindbergh took off from on his flight to France. It's where a lot of the warbirds were built to that won World War II from the Fairchild, Republic, and Grumman aircraft companies. So it's very rich in aviation history. So this just kind of solidified things. I learned more and more, and one day I found the book about naval aviation and decided that I wanted to fly F-14s off an aircraft carrier. I figured that anybody can land a plane on a 10,000-foot runway. I wanted to try to land on a postage stamp trying to get away from me at 30 knots. In fact, my 6th grade yearbook actually said, hopes to be a Navy fighter pilot someday. A year or so later, a little movie about ships and planes came out that you may have heard of. And once Top Gun came out, and yes, I am seriously stoked for Top Gun 2. But once Top Gun came out, that kind of solidified everything. I was going to be Maverick or Iceman or Hollywood. I didn't really care as long as I was, flying fighters and serving my country. So I geared everything in my life towards earning an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy, and to get a slot in flight school and hopefully, who knows, maybe be a Blue Angel someday. Unfortunately, though, in 10th grade, I started wearing glasses, and that torpedoed, so to speak, any chances I had of flying the planes for the Navy. But I had other options. I could be the guy in the back seat. I could be Goose. And incidentally, anybody ever wonder why Goose never, ducked? If you didn't get that, watch the movie again, you'll get it. Anywho, so I trundled along, and I did get a congressional nomination to the Naval Academy. But unfortunately, in the last round, I didn't make it. I was cut from the last round. I did, however, as I mentioned earlier, gain acceptance to SUNY Maritime College in the Bronx. Now, Maritime is run just like the Naval Academy. It has a regimental system. You wear uniforms. It has a freshman orientation called Inductionation Week. Shorter than Plebe Summer at the Naval Academy, but it's still there. So I was pretty excited because I also earned a 3-year Naval ROTC scholarship. If, and this was the big if, I kept my grades up my freshman year. So I went there, got through indoctrination, went through my first semester, and I got 3.2, so I was pretty happy about that. Second semester, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I took a little extracurricular course, and because I devoted a little too much time to that, my grades slipped, and I got a 2.3 that semester, so I wound up losing my Naval ROTC scholarship. So you may have heard of that little extracurricular class somewhere along the line. I did become an EMT on our campus rescue squad, but I lost my scholarship, and that just kind of really set me over the edge. It was my own fault, and I was just an 18-year-old kid at the time. But I just couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was telling me that, hey, the last 10 years of your life are pretty much wasted trying to do what you wanted to do. You weren't going to make it anyway. These were the thoughts kind of going around my head, and it just sort of sent me into more and more of a depression. My life just really seemed to lack a direction at that point. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I wound up actually resigning from the Naval ROTC unit, which when all was said and done, I was cougar. So I went on my first training cruise and got through that. And things just seemed to keep spiraling on me because I really still didn't know what I was going to do. And it all kind of came to a head the night of the Halloween mixer my sophomore year. I was on call for the campus ambulance that night as the duty driver. I was also a lieutenant, so I was one of the staff officers for it. But pretty much everybody was at the mixer. I was by myself. My roommate had gone home for the weekend, so I felt even more alone than I had previously. And being a military college, I didn't really feel comfortable talking to anybody about it. It was one of those things, hey, you don't show any emotions, you don't show weakness, you don't complain about these things. So I just kept it all inside, and I let it fester too much. And this night I felt really alone, and it really just came to a head, like I said. So my dorm room, this was Bayless Hall down here. You can see the pointer there, just to the left of where it says Maritime College in the building in the foreground. I called up the campus police. I put the ambulance out of service and told them I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't entirely a lie. And I went into my room. I opened up the window and sat on the ledge. And I sat there for a while, and you see the water down in the front there. This dorm actually faces out towards the Long Island Sound. So there's really not a whole lot of chances of people seeing you just kind of sitting there. The Throgs Neck Bridge is out there, but it's kind of a ways away. And I don't really remember what I was thinking. I don't remember what went through my head, although I do briefly remember thinking, well, maybe if I get a running start, I could clear the roadway and maybe land on the rocks, so it would be a while before anybody found me. I will admit I wasn't a physics major, so I don't know how well that would have worked out. But I sat for a while, and I don't know if it was a half hour or 40 minutes or an hour, and I don't know, I really can't tell you if I had some sort of epiphany, if I heard voices of some sort, or if Billy Joel appeared to me on the bridge up above. But I kind of changed my mind. I came back in, closed the window, and I do remember crying for a while. Not ashamed to admit that. But I figured that, okay, maybe that wasn't the answer. Hopefully, I can figure something out. I'll go on. I'll figure something out. The next morning, I was on call for the local volunteer ambulance, and there still are volunteer ambulances and fire departments within the city of New York. But my shift at Throgs Neck Ambulance, my partner for that day was going to be the chief of the campus ambulance, who at the time I thought was a good friend. So I figured, well, if anybody, can understand what I'm going through and would know, somebody I could talk to, it would be him. So we got done with our rig checks and, got everything settled in. And we sat down, and he asked me why I had put the ambulance out of service the night before, and I started to tell him what had happened and what I had nearly done. And he looked at me, and he looked me in the eye, and he got this big grin on his face, and he said, "Whoa, EDP? And he got up and walked away from me. Now, EDP was a radio code for emotionally disturbed person. This was not a term of endearment in the early 90s in New York City EMS. Certainly still not really a term of endearment, but that's a story for another day. So basically, someone who I thought that could help me through this, or maybe I could just talk to about it, insulted me and walked away from me on a time of greatest need. So in my mind, it just got that, hey, if he doesn't want to hear it, then I don't think anybody wants to hear it. So I just kept it bottled up. I didn't try to hurt myself again, which was probably a good thing. But certainly, it was 25 years before I told anybody else about it. Not my parents, not my best friends, not any of my friends. And it just kind of held it inside. But I really have to tell you, so many people out there say that suicide is the easy way out. And speaking, well, from experience, it's not in any way, shape, or form the easy way out. It's not easy to come to the decision to want to end your own life, not in any stretch of the imagination. And just as difficult was the decision to keep on and to not end my life. And folks say that it's selfish. It's not. It's not selfish because, you know, I thought that, hey, I'd be doing everybody a favor, that it would be good for everybody else if I wasn't around. So, you know, I can knock out two of those myths for you right there. So it's not what everybody likes to think. And maybe not everybody, but certainly it goes around out there. So that's my story. Nothing too spectacular, not too terribly long. But I do want to introduce you to a few other folks, some of our brothers and sisters who unfortunately did not make the same choice that I did, and they unfortunately completed suicide. The first two are in the public domain and definitely searchable, so we're going to discuss them first here. This is Robert O'Donnell. You youngins that may still be here probably don't know anything about him. Some of the more salty folks that are listening in probably will remember him, or at very least will remember what he did. Robert O'Donnell was a firefighter paramedic for the Midland, Texas Fire Department. On October 14th of 1987, baby Jessica McClure was playing around in her backyard when she fell down an old abandoned well shaft that hadn't been covered up. For about 58 hours, Midland and mutual aid companies, with the help of several local oil drilling companies, attempted to drill parallel shafts to rescue baby Jessica. Now, Robert wasn't on the initial response, but since it was such a prolonged incident, he was eventually rotated in. This also, in fact, was one of the very first televised major rescues that was televised basically around the world. CNN was still kind of in its infancy, but they covered it and kind of went around the clock with it. So this was, you know, very big news back then, of course. Now, when Robert did respond, he was there for basically the final push to rescue Jessica from the well. He was pretty much okay with being the person to go down there, but he was more or less voluntold. It just so happens that Robert was the tallest and skinniest person that was there. But Robert went in and he climbed down into this tiny hole that was really not much bigger than he was, and about 50 feet below the surface is how far it went down. And all the while, Robert was actually claustrophobic. So can you imagine being claustrophobic and going into this tiny tunnel beneath the ground? I can't. But certainly he pushed in. He knew there was a job to be done, and he did it. And we've certainly seen this quote in many different places, certainly among the fire service. But me being a fan of Doctor Who, I'm going to attribute it to the third Doctor. Courage isn't a matter of not being frightened. It's being afraid and doing what you have to do anyway. So Robert pushed in and got to Jessica, but unfortunately, she was still pretty much wedged in there. He wasn't able to get her out. And Robert had to back out of there. And certainly it's not in any firefighter, paramedic, EMTs, police officers, soldiers' creed to leave anyone behind. But there was just no getting her out at that particular moment. So he did back out. They were able to go in, widen the hole a little bit, and on the second attempt, Robert was able to rescue Jessica and bring her to the surface. The photo a few frames ago was actually is Robert's brother, who was also a paramedic for Midland, holding her. Robert was still in the hole, kind of collecting himself. But certainly this being such a major incident at the time, there were many TV interviews, a TV movie was made. Amusingly and anecdotally for my presentation here, sorry, I just kind of There's no earthquake. I just hit the table that my computer's on. In the TV movie, the actor who played Hollywood in Top Gun actually portrayed Robert in this TV movie. But Robert handled this fame a little too well, so to speak. He would kind of go around saying, "Do you know who I am?" He got a lot of ribbing from his coworkers about that, and many of the other incidents that happened. But eventually, the fame fleeted, like it always does, and it kind of left a hole in him. He kind of liked being the Robert O'Donnell who rescued baby Jessica. And from time, he would think about the children on all the other calls he'd been on. Why were they any less important? The ones that he couldn't save, what about them? And he kind of fell into a depression and a funk himself. He began to drink. He began to use drugs. And in 1992, he was fired from the Midland Fire Department. His downward spiral continued. And then on April 19th in 1995, he, like many of us, watched the coverage of the bombing of the Alfred Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. And he watched as several deceased children were brought out of the daycare center that was located on the lower floor of the building. His wife quoted him as saying, "Those guys are going to need a lot of help," and how right he was. Unfortunately, though, 4 days after the bombing, Robert went out into a field, put a gun to his head, and ended his life. His note said in part, "No help from anyone but family." And I can't help thinking that we pride ourselves in being a family in the fire service and EMS and law enforcement. Where were they? All they did was give him crap about things. Why? It just shouldn't have happened like that. This is Nicole Mittendorf. Nicole was a firefighter paramedic for Fairfax County, Virginia. And if this one doesn't, disgust you, I don't know what does. Nicole, unfortunately, was a victim of sexual harassment and bullying in her department, along with several other female members of the department. She just wanted to serve her community, but unfortunately, she had to fight off advances and bullying from male members of the department. She didn't feel that she was getting support from above, from the management of the department, and this just, sent it into a worse situation. And folks, this has no place in the fire service, EMS, dispatching, police, in any of these businesses. Everyone, regardless of race, gender, creed, color, anything, you've earned your place to be here. They've earned their place to be on the squad, in the cruiser, on the engine, in the ambulance. And this bullying and harassment has absolutely no place in it. It needs to stop. It just has to stop, because this keeps happening, and we can't let it go on. Nicole disappeared one day. They found her car in the Shenandoah National Forest, and several days later, they found her body hanging from a tree. The note left in her car, her husband hasn't released the details of it, but he's told people that it's raised just as many questions as it's answered for him. This needs to not happen ever again. This is Velma. I don't have any permission from the family to divulge her name, of course. I will talk about her situation. She did actually look kind of like the character from Scooby-Doo, so we're just kind of going with this. But I felt it very important to share her story. Velma was one of our loyalty rewards customers, I think is the PC term this week, at one of the agencies that I've worked for. And the thing about Velma was she did have multiple legitimate medical issues. She had lupus, she had diabetes, she had asthma, she had her laundry list of medications. But she would start to have an asthma attack, and she would wait to call 911. She would take her meds, but frequently, unfortunately, they wouldn't work. And she would wait too long till she could barely speak to the dispatchers, and by the time we would get there, she'd be either completely unresponsive, barely moving any air. I probably transported her about a dozen times myself over a year and a half, and I know there were quite a few calls for her that other crews responded to. I was the QA manager, so I had to review all the charts. But at one point, about halfway through all of this, we were actually able to speak for the first time. She called early enough, and I gave her a Duoneb, and she was fine. I still wanted to get checked out at the hospital, so while we were on our way there, I finally got a chance to talk to her, and I asked her, I said, why do you wait so long? What is it that gets you like this? You see, I mean, we got here in plenty of time tonight, and we were able to help you. We're able to talk to you now. What is it? And she said, which I'm sure those who have been out in the field before have heard, I didn't want to be a burden on anybody. And before I could answer that, she looked at me, she hung her head, and she said, I know how we treated the frequent flyers. And that was a big gut check. It really was. It turns out that Velma was a medic near Philly. She was medically retired because of all her issues. She couldn't do the job anymore, and she missed it. She was one of us. And I told her that. I said, you're one of us. We will take care of you. And she smiled a little bit at that, but unfortunately, it was all for naught. We never actually spoke again. Subsequent calls that I went on with her was back to the same, where we couldn't speak. She couldn't speak. And the day after Thanksgiving, in 2014, I was on when we got the call for the cardiac arrest at the all too familiar address. And we got there, and Velma was gone. Her sister was there and said that she was feeling lousy at dinner the night before, at Thanksgiving dinner. They couldn't convince her to go to the hospital. Velma went home. Her sister checked in on her. Still couldn't convince her to go. And that morning, when she came to check on her, Velma was gone. It wasn't ruled a suicide, but I just can't think of it really in any other terms. Her sister said that Velma dreadfully missed taking care of people. She didn't want to be the one who had to be taken care of. Folks, sometimes you just don't know who's on that stretcher. Talk to your patients, please. Get to know them, not just their problems. You never know what difference you might make on that. Could be a big one. This is Nick Albright. Nick was a paramedic for a place where I worked as well. We were co-workers, although I didn't get to know him very well. We just kind of saw each other at shift change. He also worked at one of the local hospitals in the emergency department, so I would hand off patients to him occasionally. I speak of Nick with the permission of his widow, Lindsay. She spoke to me at length about him. Nick spent some time in foster care when he was young, with unfortunately some of the bad elements that go along with that. And he did have some long-term mental health concerns, but he had them under control with medications. He wanted to give back to the community, so he became an EMT and then a paramedic because he wanted to help others. And Lindsay said that he was absolutely happiest when treating patients. She actually said that being a medic saved him. Unfortunately, at one point, though, Nick started to have seizures and was diagnosed with epilepsy. He was taken off the road at a different agency that he worked at and put in dispatch. And unfortunately, he took a lot of ribbing from his coworkers, calling him, among other things, floppy fish. It wasn't by his choice by any stretch of the imagination, so it really got him. The seizures were eventually managed with medications. He was allowed to work again, but he felt like he was broken being on more medications. He was still somewhat happy at work, and he was an absolute hands-on happy dad who loved his kids, as Lindsay told me. But as time went on, as it always does, he was eventually diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder. He tried many different things to try to deal with it, including keeping a journal. And Lindsay told me at one point he wrote in his journal, I have a wife that loves me unconditionally and 3 kids who love me, and I'm not happy, and I don't understand why. Nick began to change. He wasn't a hands-on happy dad. He wasn't the loving husband that he used to be. His doctors kept altering his medications, but unfortunately they wouldn't give them time to work. So he felt more and more broken, like he couldn't control things. He began to walk out of work. He began to drink more. And distressingly, his family was afraid to get him help. He wouldn't really talk about it. His family wouldn't talk about it because they were afraid he would lose his job. And that horrifies me. It really does. Nick had always told Lindsay that he would never get a gun because he was afraid that he might harm himself. But one day Nick did go out and purchase a handgun. and within an hour he was gone. I'm not here to debate gun purchasing laws or policies with you. The bottom line is our brother Nick is gone. I don't know what we could have done to help him, if we could have done anything to help him, but we never got the chance. And it left a big hole in our agencies around here. I started coming up with the idea for this project a few years ago when I attended the EMS Today conference for GEMS Magazine down in Charlotte. As you can see there, Google Maps has it at 7 hours and 40 minutes coming back up here to Dallastown where I live. It quickly turned into 9 hours because on that particular night, everybody in Virginia decided they wanted to play bumper cars on the interstate. But it was a lot of time to think. And because of my unique perspective on these things, I've been attending as many mental health lectures as I can to try to gain a little more insight into other people's experience with it, to try to be as helpful as I can, and at least be supportive of those folks that are doing these lectures. But at that point, on the way home, this lecture started to go around in my head, and I hate to call it a lecture, but this presentation kind of formulated. And I got home and started researching different case studies and started, getting some different information. And as I researched the case studies, the one common theme started to pop out, and it was always, we never saw it coming. Geez, we just never saw it coming. And I thought to myself, with all this renewed and new emphasis on post-traumatic stress and the advent of the Code Green campaign and all these other initiatives, like, how is that possible? How are we not seeing it nowadays? And then it happened to us, and we never saw it coming. This is Matt Clancy. Matt was a paramedic for the Baltimore County Fire Department. He was also a part-time paramedic for York Regional EMS, where I used to be a supervisor. I was one of Matt's paramedic instructors. Sometimes I was a supervisor. But most importantly, Matt was my friend. Matt was one of those guys who was always smiling. He loved to joke around and have fun. He was an excellent paramedic, one that you would trust your children with. And really, he was a friend to all. Never really had a bad word to say about folks. And if he did joke around with you like that, have some words or whatnot, either you earned it or he's just having fun with you. He was absolute devoted husband to his wife, who gave me permission to speak of him, and he was a loving father to his 2 daughters. But one night, Matt was in his basement while his family was out, and he put a gun to his head and he ended his life. And we just don't know why, and we just never saw it coming. His wife never saw it coming. His mother never saw it coming. He never said anything about it. He never opened up to us. And I shudder to think that, did we have an environment for him to be able to open up to us? Was it anything we said or didn't say? We'll never know. And Matt's passing left a huge hole in our hearts and in the EMS system here in York County. And he will be truly missed. So in 2015, York Regional sent me to the Ambulance Service Manager project run by Fitch & Associates, not endorsing them in any way, shape, or form, just mentioning the fact that I went there. Now, this class, you go 2 different weeks, about 8 weeks apart. And in the first week, you're assigned into a group. And you pick a subject to do a research project with that group in the interim between the 2 weeks. Now, your teammates could be from all over the country. Now, my teammates were from Maine, Massachusetts, Florida, Oregon, and California. So if you think, doing your projects with folks across town was difficult, try doing it across state. Not to take away from what you guys did. You guys did really great with your projects. But anyway, our research project was community outreach on a budget. One of the other groups decided to tackle mental health in EMS. It was something that was very dear to a few of them. And they put out a survey monkey and to credentialed EMS providers throughout the country. And they figured they'd just get a couple of hundred responses and, they present their data and then call it a day and graduate the class. It turned out they got over 4,000 responses. They got responses from every state in the Union and from several U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and Guam, of all places. And when they put it all together, they found that 85% of those who responded experienced critical stress. In EMS, that's not really surprising. But distressingly, 37% had actually contemplated suicide, when in 2012, the national average was only 3.7%. And 6.6% of those 4,000 had actually attempted suicide. And these are credentialed EMS providers. And the national average in 2012 was only 0.5%. Even more distressing and really disturbing were some of the other questions that they posed was, does your agency have an employee assistance program? Do you use it? Why or why not? And certain other questions. And their data is at the bottom there, is at the revivingresponders.com. It's the website they've set up and what they've called their group. I absolutely implore you to go look at their data. It's a real eye opener. But they found out that a significant portion of people would not use their EAP programs because they were afraid of being labeled. They were afraid of the stigma. They were afraid of losing their jobs. How the hell did we let that happen? And I say we collectively because I'm just as guilty over the years, and you would think I would know better. But we fall into that stigma, that trap of, suck it up, of, don't talk about it. It's just unconscionable that we've let that happen. And it's not just the United States. Over a 5-month period, not too long ago, 25 Canadian emergency service providers took their lives over a 5-month period. In Australia, the suicide rate for paramedics is 20 times that of the general population. The New York City Police Department has been racked by a ridiculous amount of suicides in the past couple of years. So it's certainly not just EMS, it's fire, it's police, it's dispatching, it's in the ERs, the nurses, doctors. About 2 years ago now, there was a mental health summit in London attended by representatives of the reviving responders from the United States, representatives from Canada, England, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand to get together to try to figure out what we can do about all this. And in a case distressingly similar to Nicole Mittendorf, paramedic Belinda Pope of the East Midlands Ambulance Service in England was also a victim of harassment and bullying, and was found dead in her ambulance station of a self-inflicted wound. Her husband also said that her note raised as many questions as it answered. In 2017, for the first time, when we look at fire and police fatalities, suicides actually surpassed line of duty deaths. In 2018, the number became even greater, and they found for 2019 that there were twice as many firefighter suicides as there were firefighter line of duty deaths. We've got to break that cycle. We've got to get those numbers down. We've got to do something about this. We can't just let this keep happening. We can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. And although this is emergency services related, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that 22 of the veterans of our armed forces in America commit suicide every single day. We can't let that go on. These folks have served our country. They put their lives on the line for us. We can't let them fall by the wayside. So what's causing it? Certainly post-traumatic stress is a big part of it, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. But we see bad things. We see worse things. We see horrifying things. Good things are out there, but they're few and far between. And, well, I mean, let's face it, we do see some funny stuff, too. We know that EMS takes a certain amount of intestinal fortitude, all right? If you faint at the sight of blood, EMS isn't for you. We know that. But, some folks can focus on the good and others might not be able to. Everybody has different ways of dealing with things. In the end, we're only human.
can dance and play the part, that's what you ask. Give you all I am. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. But I'm only human, and I bleed when I fall down. I'm only human, and I crash and I break down. Your words in my head, knives in my heart. You build me up and then I fall apart, 'cause I'm only human. I can turn it on. Be a good machine. I can hold the weight of words if that's what you need. Be you everything. I can do it. I can do it. I'll get through it. But I'm only human, and I bleed when I fall down. I'm only human, and I crash and I break down. Words in my head, knives in my heart. You fill me up and then I fall apart, 'cause I'm only human. I'm only human. I'm only human. Just a little human. I can take so much till I've had enough. 'Cause I'm only human, and I bleed when I fall down. I'm only human, and I crash and I break down. Your words in my head, knives in my heart. You fill me up and then I fall apart, 'cause I'm only human.
So that video just shows, a lot of the things that we deal with in emergency services, and certainly, we are only human in dealing with these things. So what causes it? Certainly we're not in this to get rich, because low pay and all of it, long hours and multiple jobs to try to make ends meet gives you a long time away from your family, bills to pay. Certain agencies have poor management, not their employees are just seen as bodies on a bus. Certain agencies have shoddy equipment, broken ambulances that they don't fix. There's bills to be paid. You have a poor diet, lack of sleep, and did I mention bills? It's certainly out there. And how do we lure people into this business? Don't really how. They see this stuff on TV. That proverbial busload of hemophiliac nuns overturning with the plane crashing into it on the highway. We don't really see too many of those things. We tell folks, hey, you're going to come be a hero, come make a difference. And we certainly do heroic things. There are heroes among us. And every single call that we go on is a chance to make a difference in someone's life. Maybe a big difference, maybe a small difference, but every call is that we have that chance. So we bring people into EMR and EMT school and paramedic school, and we teach them words like diabetic ketoacidosis, and we teach them how to take a blood pressure, and we teach them how much oxygen to give this week, because that changes all the time. But we really don't tell them how to feel when you're doing CPR on an 80-year-old woman while her husband of 60 years stands there in his underwear looking on, begging you to save her. But you know that it's really just not going to happen. We don't tell folks how they should feel when that heroin overdose you wake up with Narcan isn't just going to thank you for saving their life. They're probably going to attack you for breaking their high and ruining their night. This photo, incidentally, is actually from an Australian ad campaign. Attacks against EMS providers in Australia have gotten so bad they have a nationwide television, internet, and radio ad campaign with the tagline, "I can't fight for your mate's life if I'm fighting for mine." And we certainly don't tell folks how they should feel when the mother of a 9-year-old child looks you dead in the eye and adamantly insists that her child woke up with a spiral fracture of their femur. Just woke up with it. And every time the mother goes near the child screams for his father and is comforted by his father. A call that I went on about 15 years ago. I don't think so. And what do we hear out there? It's still out there. It's getting better, but it's still out there. Suck it up, buttercup. If you can't hack it, you don't belong here. They go on the psychiatric transfers or psychiatric emergency calls, and why can't PT transport them? And of course, the cops are like, oh, why can't the ambulances transport them? And folks are saying, oh, it's just BS. They just want attention. And the one that really turns my stomach, I'm going to write a manual, suicide, doing it right. These are the people that don't belong in our business. They really are. They really don't belong here. Unless we can get an attitude change out of them. There's no room for this in our business. We're here to help people, not make it worse. Several years ago, at a different GEMS conference, I attended a lecture by Randolph Mantooth, yes, Johnny Gage from Emergency. All you young folks are going, what? Google it. You like it. Trust me. If you ever get a chance to see Randolph Mantooth speak, I highly recommend it. He's a very good speaker and a very, very strong advocate for emergency medical services. But anyway, Randy had done a ride-along with a major metropolitan EMS agency. His unit responded to a jumper down call. A person had jumped off a second-story window ledge to the street below. And not only did the medic lack compassion, he actually went to the patient and said, hey, if you want to kill yourself, you got to go to up at least the 6th floor, man. The 2nd floor just ain't going to do it. Hey, you know who this is? Again, the people who don't belong in this business. There's no room for that. So what can happen? Certainly someone, a new person, a new EMT, seeing all this stuff, they're not going to feel comfortable talking to those peers or partners that are having that attitude. So they'll kind of hold it in. They'll go to their supervisors, and sometimes these old school supervisors are still out there saying, hey, you can't hack it, you don't belong here, go somewhere else, go do something else. And management, they just get a little skittish about things. They don't want to see them having a crazy person out in the ambulance or someone that they can't control or loose cannon. Again, not the norm, but unfortunately it's still out there. They'll be reluctant to go to their EAP programs for fear of labeling. Certainly they can't afford to go to their own outside private counselors. So it festers, and then they think about suicide, and then unfortunately it explodes and they're gone. And then folks have the nerve to say, why, we didn't see it coming. Why didn't they talk to us? Well, why the hell would they when they see people talking like this and saying stuff like that? Why would they? We have to stop stuff like this, on social media. There's joking around, folks. There's good-natured ribbing. There's having fun here and there. But we have to know where that line is, and we have to not cross that line. Some folks can take it, some folks can't. We just need to be aware of how people are feeling or how people are dealing with things. And we get told, but it's your job to deal with that sort of stuff. Yeah. It's our job to deal with death and people who are in a bad way, certainly. But I have tried to better myself in my career and looked at different job opportunities and read different job descriptions. And then I've come up with a few things that I've never found in any of these job descriptions. Certainly, taking care of a patient on a scene and having someone come up and stab you repeatedly, not in the job description. This happened in San Diego several years ago. And again, if you get these paramedics are speaking about their experiences, and I would implore you to go and see them also. They're very well spoken and have a lot of good things to say about their experiences. It also happened in Jacksonville earlier this year, so certainly not in the job description, but happens. Having your ambulance shot at, certainly not in the job description. Actually, the one in the upper right is a place where I used to volunteer, South Country Ambulance on Long Island. Definitely not in the job description, having your ambulance stolen and then being run over and killed with it, as happened in the Bronx several years ago. God bless you, Yari. And definitely not in the job description, having 220 stories worth of skyscraper fall on you. But such is our new reality. These things are happening. And, you know, as much as we don't want it to, it's out there. And what do we do about it? Certainly, most importantly, is the attitude change. We've got to eliminate that stigma surrounding mental health and EMS. We have to be able to talk about it. Just because someone needs help, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person or a bad EMT, or paramedic, or dispatcher, or cop, anything. And we talk about, you know, we are a family. We are. We understand what each other goes through. We're there on the front lines with each other. We've been through these things. And if we haven't been through something that somebody else is going through, we will at some point in time. We are a family. Act accordingly. You don't need fancy certifications. You don't need any sort of degree to just listen to somebody or just talk about things. Sometimes that's all that's needed. Is it going to solve every problem? Of course not. But it's where it has to start. It's where it has to start. And you can't just say, I've got your back. You've got to mean it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. On the night before we buried Matt, we responded to a attempted suicide where a healthcare provider had attempted to take her own life by stabbing herself repeatedly. The police on scene did a great job of getting her fixed up with a tourniquet before our transporting. But en route to the hospital, we tried to talk to her and do what we could for her that we weren't able to do for Matt. She wasn't very receptive to it, but we tried. And when all was said and done, we met in the ambulance bay afterward, and our crews, we talked about it, and we hugged, and we cried for Matt. We cried remembering him, and just hoped that we could do for her what we couldn't do for him. And then a crazy thing happened. We got back in our ambulances, and we answered more calls, and we went back to work. So they, you know, they're still good at what they do, and you know, I'd like to think I'm still good at what I do. A couple days later, on our next shift, I tried to buy the crew's ice cream, but unfortunately, as is wont to happen, we got a call just as I bought it. But it was just a matter of trying to make sure that they were okay with things. But we coped, and we just keep checking on each other. And coping mechanisms are very important. You need something to take your mind off of things. Go sit by a stream, go fishing, go to the beach, spend time with friends and family. Just don't overdo it on the food and drink. Go to a comedy club, watch a Disney movie. Trust me on the Disney movies. If you folks have seen them before, growing up with them, or parents have watched them with their kids, case in point, Zootopia. It's about a rabbit that wants to become a police officer. It's about a bunny who earns a badge. Judy Hopps is literally a badge bunny. Certainly, I don't advocate violence, but if you want to go hit something, go to a driving range, go to a batting cage, go, you know, hit a heavy bag at the gym. There's certainly plenty of things that are out there, and if something doesn't work for you, try something else. So post-traumatic stress disorder, which is more appropriately being called post-traumatic stress injury nowadays, develops in some people as a result of a shocking, scary, or dangerous event. That's the official definition from the National Institute of Mental Health. It's diagnosed with all of these things for at least 1 month, but certainly, folks, any signs and symptoms are concerning. It doesn't mean that someone's not suffering, and you may not see them all at once, so don't discount any of them. The re-experiencing symptoms, that's all the things that make you relive the traumatic incident. Flashbacks, bad dreams, frightening thoughts. Your avoidance symptoms, what makes you stay away from thoughts or problems with that experience. Your arousal and reactivity symptoms, being easily startled, feeling tense or on edge, having difficulty sleeping. Mood symptoms, trouble remembering it, negative thoughts about yourself or the world in general, distorted feelings of guilt and blame. Again, you see any of these things, you certainly need to talk about it. And cumulative stress, that's just all the stuff that builds up. It may not be one particular incident, but certainly things do build up. You don't sweat the small stuff, but small stuff can build up into big stuff. Today, it's about resiliency. It's not about what happens to you. It's how you react to, respond to, and recover from what happens to you. And Dr. Philip Callahan, who's a member of the National Alliance on EMS Resiliency, has come up with 10 tips for developing that resiliency in yourself and those around you. First off, recognize that because of the nature of our job, we're going to see extreme things and tragedies that aren't the norm for the most of the population. We know that. Our training has focused on keeping ourselves physically safe. Scene safety, BSI, scene safety, BSI. But we haven't been trained to protect ourselves from mental health issues. And you got to understand that these stressors may not immediately impact you. It may not show for days, weeks, or even longer. You have to be aware of loss of productivity, sleeplessness, depression, thoughts of helplessness, thoughts of suicides in yourself and those around you, and make sure that you seek help or get help for the people who are experiencing them. And if you haven't done so, make sure you have a social support system. Make sure you have friends or family, people you can talk to, inside or outside work. It's one of the best protective factors from the extremes of post-traumatic stress. Practice those coping skills and recognize that you can't always change the challenges facing you, but you can change your belief and the attitude about how you face the challenge. And recognize that changing a challenge or changing a belief might not occur immediately, just like the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress may not exhibit right away. You have to set realistic goals and realistic steps to meet that goal. This one always gets a laugh. Make sure that your physical strength is good. You know, a healthy diet, plenty of exercise, plenty of sleep. It's difficult in our business, but we have to do our best to try. And as that support system develops, you develop a mutual trust and mutual support, understanding what each other is going through. And it's a process. You have to maintain that social support system, practice those coping skills, and adapt as you need to. If something's not working, try something else. Apologize for jumping through that there. And the National Alliance on EMS Resiliency, they're not as active as they used to be, but they were made up of pretty much all the other alphabet soups that are out there. Commissioner O'Neill, he's no longer the commissioner of the NYPD, but they've been hit with a number of suicides over the past few years. He mentioned that your job requires that you spend your day helping others, but before you can take care of anyone else, you must first take care of yourself. So please, remember, if you need it, help is here and help is available. We agree in an ideal world, seeking out help is never a sign of weakness, it's a sign of great strength. If you're having a problem of any kind, contact the services offered inside and outside the department, because you never have to shoulder your burden alone. He said that on the suicide of a 24-year-old police officer with only 2 years on the job. And it is a sign of great strength to know when you need help. If an engine company arrives on scene and finds a fully involved building, they're going to call for backup. They're going to call for more engines. If a police officer arrives on scene and finds himself under gunfire, he's going to call for more officers. If an ambulance arrives on scene and finds an MCI, they're going to call for more ambulances. If you're having trouble with your mental health, if you're having trouble dealing with something, call for backup. Call for additional help. People are out there that will listen. Take a screenshot of this, please. These are a lot of telephone resources that are out there. Okay, Safe Call Now, Fire EMS Helpline. Those are staffed by emergency services providers. Copline has police officers that will take your call. Veterans Crisis Line for those who need it. Online resources, the Code Green campaign, Reviving Responders. All those other ones are different Facebook sites that have people that are willing to listen. And if you think anything I've said here has had some worth today, that's my personal email address. please feel free to contact me. I'm also on Facebook Messenger. I'll listen because I understand. I've been there. I've got your back. You just don't know what someone's going through, and no one else is going to know what you're going through if you don't talk it out. Don't try to hide it. There's so many types of mental health issues out there, and so many people that are willing to listen. Unfortunately, there are those who believe that mental health isn't a problem in EMS. They're entitled to their opinion, but the fact is our brothers and sisters are killing themselves, and it's up to all of us to put a stop to it. This is the point where I usually get people to raise hands, but since I can't see anybody right now, I'm just going to go through my little spiel here. Some of you may be some sort of EMT instructors, paramedic instructors, CPR instructors, first aid instructors, field training officers, preceptors. Maybe you got roped into precepting because the preceptor called off any particular day. Maybe you've shown somebody around the firehouse where the bathrooms are. So shown somebody where the equipment is on the rig. Point being, at some point in our careers, we're all educators. We all have the opportunity, and I submit the obligation to get the new people involved in this and to let them know that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to talk about this stuff.
I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate your presentation. I'm going to have to sign off. I got little kids going to bed. But again, great job. Thank you again. And you talked about a topic that we don't talk about enough, and there's a lot of issues moving forward. And I appreciate your bravery just to be able to share this. So thank you. And
thank you.
God bless you.
So as I look back on it, I've come up with the top 5 reasons that I'm glad I didn't jump, and I'm thinking it's probably something worthwhile that you might want to write down. But there they are right there. It's my wife, Joy, my sons, Gus, Tim, Jacob, and Christopher. They're pretty much my world. They are my world. And, if I had jumped, we wouldn't have brought these 4 wonderful, precocious boys into this world. And the world is definitely a better place for them being here. Certainly a 6 is friends. This is my best friend, Paul. He's a captain with the Riverside County Fire Department out in California. We talk a lot. We were able to help each other through things, and he's just really been a big help in my life. And 7th, I did actually get to fly. I hate this picture, but I was a flight paramedic for Stony Brook University Hospital in Long Island for 7 years, and a year down here with Lifeline. So really the point there is you never know what's going to happen in your life. I hate to use the cliche, but when you feel you hit rock bottom, you've got nowhere to go but up. Things can get better. They will get better, but it can take time. It will take time. You need to give it time. But if you take your own life, your chances of things getting better have gotten precisely 0. You don't know what your future holds. Another doctor once said, your future isn't written yet, so make it a good one. I'd like to leave you with this. So that's the way it is. Good days, bad days, up days, down days, sad days, happy days, but never a boring day on this job. You do what God has called you to do. You show up, you put one foot in front of another, you get on the rig and you go out and you do the job, which is a mystery and a surprise. You have no idea when you get on that rig. No matter how big the call, no matter how small, you have no idea what God is calling you to. But he needs you. He needs me. He needs all of us. That was said by Father Michael Judge, chaplain of the FDNY, on September 10th, 2001. The next day, he would become fatality number 1 in the attacks in the World Trade Center. My brothers and sisters, we need to be there for each other. If you don't believe in God, that's fine. Substitute the deity of your choice, or call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. But we need to be there for each other because we understand each other. We owe it to Robert, we owe it to Matt, we owe it to Nick, we owe it to Velma, and we owe it to Nicole to be there for each other. Until no more of our brothers and sisters feel that suicide is the only way out. Until no more of our brothers and sisters feel that they have no one left to talk to. We're always saying everyone goes home, and certainly amen to that. But you know what? It'd be really great if everybody came back for the next shift too. Thank you very much for your time. There's my email address again, and yes, I'm on AOL. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it, man. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. There's still a couple people that haven't put their Con Ed in yet. If you want Con Ed.
Yeah. Rick, I just got to bail, okay? When my kids got hurt at the baseball game, so I got to run.
All right, man. Be safe.
All right, thanks.
All right. So please put down your Con Ed. I'll wait a couple more minutes for everybody to get in. But if you want Con Ed for Matt's presentation, I need it after his your Con Ed number down after that. And that'll be posted tomorrow. So again, I thank everybody for your time and attention this evening. The medics are done. For this year. This was their last major assignment, so thanks for helping me. And hopefully you guys all learned something with that. And I look forward to seeing if anybody's coming in next year. You guys have a little vignette of what you're going to experience next year at this time. So thanks again. I'll leave the chat box open for a minute or two to get the last couple Con Eds. If not, talk to you later and have a good one. Bye-bye.